Hi, all, and welcome to episode 44 of Plain Speaking Sanjiv. Today, I'm going to speak to you about an example of attention to detail and how small things can make a big difference. The topic I'm going to talk about specifically is airport announcements in India and elsewhere in the world. Now, when I first came back to India in 2013, what used to really amaze me, and actually even throughout the years prior to coming back to SpiceJet at that time, I used to be amazed by how many last and final announcements there would be for boarding a flight. In the good old days of Indian Airlines, there used to be at least five last and final announcements, and last and very final announcement, and it would just go on and on. It became kind of a joke. Nobody would really pay attention because it's like crying fire when there's no fire. Nobody would take this announcement seriously. So one of the first things I did when I came back to SpiceJet, and I would do my rounds quietly, watching and observing, and seeing that yes, even at SpiceJet, this was I'm talking about November, December 2013 for a routine flight. I remember a departure out of Chennai. There were about 12 boarding announcements made, five of which were last and finals. So I put up a requirement basically that there will be maximum three boarding announcements: the initial boarding, a reminder, and a final boarding, and then the door will close. And I said, if there's more than three announcements, then somebody's not doing the job right. Of course, the initial reaction I got was, "Sir, it's impossible. You don't know this is India. We are different." The usual stuff about all kinds of reasons why it's not possible. But I said, I don't care. We let's give this a shot and let's see if we can make it work. And sure enough, three announcements worked fine. People started taking the last and final announcement seriously because they knew that there wouldn't be no more. So when the last and final announcement was made, people who were regulars in SpiceJet actually took it seriously and boarded the aircraft. Worked very well. So that's one example of where excessive airport announcements, which can be annoying and counterproductive, were managed to a large extent. The other example is actually the other extreme, where some airports don't allow any announcements at all. And I think that's also a little counterproductive because airports are there for a purpose. They're transit hubs. The multiple flights departing from multiple gates near to each other. Boarding needs to be sequenced often, basis row number or priority status or class of service, etc. And by not allowing any announcement at all in the boarding gate area, what you actually create is a fish market. Because the staff are not allowed to use the PA system or microphones, they start shouting out. And Bombay, which is a fantastic airport otherwise, is a classic example of this, where boarding at Bombay before COVID used to be, for many airlines, chaos. It was literally like Howrah Station, where the gate staff would just be shouting out row numbers and boarding has started, priority boarding, this, that. And I could not understand why Bombay Airport found that preferable to some reasonable number of polite, soft PA announcements. So what I did at that time when I was at Vistara is I said there will be no shouting at Vistara gates, and we started this Japanese boarding style instead, which is we had these handheld placards where our staff would walk around with row numbers, now boarding, mentioned on it, or gold and platinum, now boarding. And they would walk around and softly just draw people's attentions to those placards, and people would board accordingly. And I think it was reasonably successful. But even that is fairly hard to implement in India because people are used to announcements and people are used to the shouting. So my suggestion would be to all airports is that we need to strike a balance. I completely agree that there should not be a situation where boarding announcements for every flight are heard all over the terminal. It should not be the case that a boarding announcement for gate 72 is being played in the food court, because then it would just be crazy. It would just be noise the entire time. Passengers have to take some responsibility and show up at the gate at least half an hour, 40 minutes before departure. But at the gate itself, there should be gate-specific boarding announcements so that staff can manage the boarding process, can enforce the sequence that is required for boarding, and can do it in a very calm and, if I may use the word, civilized manner, rather than screaming it out because of an artificial restriction on announcements. And I just want to add to this that nowhere else in the world really, and I have been to a lot of countries, I travel a lot, have I seen a restriction on boarding announcements at the gate. It is very common for announcements not to be permitted in the general PA system, boarding announcements, especially gate-specific announcements. But at the gate, nowhere else in the world have I seen a restriction on announcements, because I think people understand airport is there for a practical function. People at the gate need to communicate with those who are waiting to board, and there's a certain process that needs to be followed. And it's far better to have well-managed gate announcements than to have the screaming and shouting that is a substitute in a place like Bombay. So anyway, this is the purpose of this is not to pick on any one airport or to pick on Bombay, etc. It's just for us to to think through the logic and the implications of policies we make, which may be made with the best of intentions, to reduce the number of announcements at the airport, to make airports less stressful, to make it calmer, etc. All wonderful intentions, but to put some practical limitations on when you put these conditions in place, and to allow what is required for the basic function of an airport to be able to be executed efficiently, which is allow announcements at the gate. Again, on the flip side, airports that do not restrict announcements at all, that's also extremely undesirable. I think airports should manage announcements. They should not allow unlimited number of announcements. They should not allow terminal-wide boarding announcements. And airlines should make it a point that this whole last and final joke, no longer continues, that they make a limited number of announcements and that the announcements actually are enforced and taken seriously. So that's it for today. And I think tomorrow the topic I'm going to come with is, the common complaint passengers have that if my flight was delayed or cancelled, nobody gave me a message, nobody called me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow and why that happens. All right, take care and see you tomorrow. Bye.